nice sort of, I really used to like Zend until it went fully Eclipse, and so it kind of feels like the old Zen Studio tools.
I use that on Mac and develop with NAV, and it's perfect. Haven't had much trouble migrating to live environments or anything like that.
It's got Git support, which a lot of other IDEs don't. You know.
And what's that called? Aptana?
Aptana, A-P-T-A-N-A, Studio 3.
It's got built-in FTP also, so.
Has anybody ever worked with virtual servers, with like VirtualBox or VMware, and had any success with that?
One thing some of you guys might want to check out is the Quick Start project. It's a box image that's linked from a project on Drupal.org. You can download it as a torrent, and it already has a lot of development tools and scripts to install new Drupal 7, Drupal 6 development sites, and sort of a lot of best practices already configured into it.
What is that?
It's called Quick Start.
For VirtualBox.
I actually had a bunch of developers. I've typically been Linux and people on Mac OS 10, and had a change in developers, and they're diehard Windows fans. And I tried going the virtual machine route, but then they complained that, you know, 'cause a lot of them were also doing Photoshop and other things on there, and they complained about the drag on their system. And you know, I couldn't see dedicating all kinds of resources toward them, so I got, you know, like a Revo, an Acer Revo, right? You know, real cheap NetTop machine. And so that kind of filled the gap for them developing, you know, locally. They have a machine that, you know, that's its entire purpose is to emulate the server, and it was relatively low cost. And it also doesn't impact their main computer then. Kind of compromise.
So any other questions or comments?
I'm curious to hear from you guys or some of the other people here that are working in larger projects with multiple developers. What are some good practices of having multiple developers work on certain pieces of it, putting it on the dev and kind of testing it? And how do you do that? And how do you keep track of what everybody's doing?
Right, I think the source control definitely helps with that. And I think source control and local development almost go hand in hand. They really work together great, so that you can be developing locally, you can create branches, and you can work on your piece, and then the source control will actually help merge those changes in. So when you push to your staging site, or you can pull from another developer, so I could pull in all the changes that Brian's done on his piece of the project, and bring them locally, test them all, and make sure that my changes work with his. So a lot of it is the source control will help with that.
How do you deal with the database changes that go along with that?
Database and Drupal and databases and source control do not go well together. Features definitely helps. The problem with Drupal and databases, for anybody that's not familiar with it, is Drupal stores a lot of configuration in the database. So if Brian's going to go on and he's working on a piece for the site that requires creating fields and creating views, all of that configuration is stored in the database. It's not content necessarily. He's not creating nodes, but he's creating the structure of the nodes and the structure of the views, and all of that information is stored in the database. So in order for me to get that, I have to have some way of grabbing his database. Well, if I grab his database, it's going to overwrite everything that I've been doing on my own fields and my own views. The features module will help with that. The features module will actually take all of that configuration and spit it out as code. And then you can keep that code as, right, yeah. There are still things that are not integrated with features.
And for the things that aren't, the easiest way to manage that is the everything's an update model programming. So you write a custom module, add an update hook, and do the settings in there. Just put a bunch of queries that change the settings you have to change.
So definitely one strategy is using features or custom modules to where you can get that configuration into the code, and then you can source control it, and when you pull stuff down, everybody will get that. What we've had some success with too is where the database always comes down from the production servers. The downside is sometimes you do have to go on the production server and duplicate stuff that you've done locally. If I'm going on and creating some content types or some things that are configuration that's stored in the database, I might have to duplicate that on the production server in order to get it there. And then I'm always pulling the database down from production. So when I go to develop on a site, every morning I have a script that runs that just downloads the production database, and I can load that onto my local development. So I always have the most recent content on the site and any configuration changes that were made on the site. But the database always comes down. I'm never going to take my local database and replace the production database.
There's no silver bullet for databases.
Databases are hard.
Even features has its flaws. I mean, you get a lot in there, you start getting a lot of code and stuff, modules. Unfortunately, there's really not much we can do about that right now. So.
All right, any other questions before we move on? All right, so next one we're going to talk about, this one's a little bit shorter, but ticket and issue tracking. Like I said earlier, when I first came on at Monarch, we were using Google Docs spreadsheets to keep track of our tasks and our projects. So I'm going to ask, first of all, how many people here have ever used spreadsheets as ticket tracking or as tracking tasks? It's convenient. You don't have to install complex software. You just, on one line, you write the task and you can keep a status and say what's going on. Similar to source control though, I like the ticket and issue tracking because of the history that it provides. With a spreadsheet, you can keep track of maybe a little description and you can keep track of the current status, but there's really no easy way to see a history of where that issue has gone through and where it's been, and if you have to go back and look at it to see what happened with that issue. So ticket tracking software, the advantage again is the history that it provides. If I'm working on an issue and I get about halfway done at the end of the day, I can go on there, I can update, put a post, update where the status of this ticket is, make sure that, you know, if I put in a good description of where I left off, then the next day if I can't come in, if I'm sick, and Brian has to take over that issue, he doesn't have to get on the phone and call me and say, where did you leave this issue, where do I pick up? He can go into the ticket and see right away, okay, here is where I need to pick up on this issue, and he can take it over. Another advantage is it's very transparent for the client. When the client says, why am I paying you all this money? What are you actually doing? You can say, oh, well, here's a list of exactly what we're doing, and here's the history of what's happened. And so they can even, you can provide them a login, they can get emails every time that issue is updated, and they can see, it's very transparent, they can see exactly what you're working on, and it helps them to know that you are being prompt at answering their questions, you are getting stuff done, and they can see that right away. There's some problems that you have to be careful with ticket tracking. You need very descriptive titles and very descriptive descriptions within your ticket. We've had one ticket out there that's update monarchdigital.com to Drupal 7. Well, as a developer, I get that and see, oh, okay, I'm going to update Monarch Digital to Drupal 7, great. But that's not specific enough to really know where to start working. I need, you know, as a developer, I would want something that's specific, and I can go in and say, I know exactly where I need to start working on this, and I can get it done. So the more specific the task can be, the better it is for assigning it for a developer when I get that.
That sounds like a project, not a task.
That is, yeah, that would be because there's hundreds of projects within that task. So as much as you can break down, but it's very easy when you say, oh, this needs to be done, just to go in and quick make a little ticket and leave the description blank or something like that. The advantage of ticket tracking really is in the description so that I can look at it and know exactly where I need to start working, and it's very specific. So the best practice would be not only to use ticket and issue tracking, especially internally, but even with your clients, but also to have very specific tasks and as descriptive as possible.
Wow, that sounded great. So, an argument with that, ticket and tracking systems are great internally, but for the client, no, it's not. There's been a lot of discussion whether to put the clients on the ticket system so they can send you a ticket if something goes wrong, and it sounds great, but it's very impersonal. There was a lecture yesterday about the client's perspective, and he was stressing the point of interacting with your developers, interacting with the website company, and how important that was. They always wonder about the ticket status. Okay, this is emergency. Have they got it yet? Have they got it yet? It's slower than talking. I mean, how often do you think you'll get a ticket that says the site is broke, please fix? Well, you're going to end up calling back anyway saying, could you be more specific, or write them another ticket, and that just creates a huge hassle. Everything takes longer. it's just faster to talk to them on the phone. It's more personal, and they like to know what's going on. We asked a few of our clients if they would like to try a ticket system out, and none of them wanted to. They liked the interaction they had currently, which is just calling up if there's a problem. And well, luckily we don't have any clients that really abuse that, but it's good for tracking projects internally, but it should never be mandatory for the clients. Never. And of course, you give your clients options. It's customer service, whether you like it or not.
So,
What are you using then?
we're actually using Chili Project. It's an open source project. It's a fork of Redmine, which is also open source. But and one of the main reasons we use that is because it integrates with our time tracking also. We're using Harvest for time tracking, and there's a module for Chili Project that will integrate, or a plugin that will integrate with Harvest, so it will keep track of the time that you're spending on a specific issue and makes it easier to keep track. But there's a number of tools out there, so I'm curious, that kind of opens it up, what tools are other people using?
We use Pivotal Tracker, and I'm the client, and I love it.
Okay.
What's it called? Pivotal Tracker?
We use Track in-house, quite frankly, I hate it.
Okay.
I wish we would switch to Redmine, but it's really not an option for us not to use it. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 180 developers in-house, and all of them can be on 3 or 4 projects at the same time. And if we had to manage phone calls with the client and try and keep track of all the issues that have to be resolved, this is not possible.
Yeah.
So,
A lot of
yes,
clients,
absolutely.
I think we got spoiled.
Absolutely, project managers, lead developers should be touching base with the clients on a regular basis, at least once a week. But a ticket system has to be in place, it really has to, or you just cannot make sure you cover everything.
Yeah,
I concur.
When we first started using this, I thought it was a little bit of overhead because we were putting time and Harvest and descriptions of what we did. And then we use this, so not only are we putting times and descriptions of what we did in Harvest, we're putting it in Chili Project too, we're duplicating it. But it is nicely integrated, so usually all you have to do in Harvest is put ticket number, blah, 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 and it actually turns into a link, sends the information to Chili Project, and saves you some time. So.
It's pretty common in my consultancy that a client will get online at 11:30 at night and put a ticket into the ticketing system. I'm not going to pick up the phone at 11:30 at night.
Oh, of course not.
And I don't have a single client that has said, I hate ticketing.
Yeah.
I can't stand it. Now, I agree with this gentleman over here. Touch points on a regular basis by phone are critical to maintain the relationship. But the idea that a client, do you actually have clients that say, I absolutely won't use a ticketing system?
We don't have a single client that does.
They are very spoiled, like Rick
Yeah.
said, and they like calling in saying, hey, could you do this real quick? And we're like, yes. Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
And
I got
right
good
now we
jokes.
have few enough clients that we can
Yeah.
manage to that. It's not,
Yeah.
we still do occasionally have a few minutes a day that we can work without, talking to a client. But I can see, especially as your client base grows, it's impractical to be on the phone. But we have had a lot of clients that enjoy talking directly to a developer.
Sure.
Even though as a developer, I don't know always how to interact with a client. Something like that. They still like having access to the developers. So we've spoiled our clients, and now when we go and say, oh, by the way, we're using a ticket tracking system, here you go, you can't call us anymore. Well, they don't
But
like that.
that's not what I'm suggesting at all. You
No,
you
use that as convenience.
use a combination of the
Yeah,
two.
they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Yeah.
You use a combination of the two because, frankly, you also want to be in a place, in my opinion, where you've got a history, just like versioning, a history of your conversations with clients.
Right.
And in fact, when I finish a conversation with a client, I'll go into Open Atrium, I write up what it was that we discussed, and the client, part of our process is the client is required to go in and say, yep, that's what we talked about, or, oh, here are the details that I think you missed, or you missed the boat entirely, here's what I think we talked about.
Hey man, if it's not in writing, it wasn't communicated.
Right, exactly.
That was actually a hot topic for us for a while, is saying, okay, when they call up and they want something real quick, should you make a ticket every time? Like
Yes.
they say, hey, could you...
I document everything.
And see,
Absolutely everything.
We went on the point where someone want really quick things, like, hey, could you move this user real quick?
Mm-hmm.
And
So let's say that you do that and you don't have it documented, and then somebody else in the company says, "What the heck happened?
Right.
Such and such has gone wrong," and you're out sick, and suddenly you're all scrambling trying to figure out why this user role suddenly has different permissions. People start yelling, people start complaining. If you've got it documented, you can go right to your documentation system, whether it's Open Atrium or whether it's Redmine or whether it's Jira or Track or whatever, and you can say, oh, on Monday, June 4th at 3:15, this request came in, even if the client isn't entering that ticket in, and you can say who the request came from. It reduces so much stress and so much potential conflict you can't imagine.
And it's impossible to manage your developers. I mean, this whole conversation, we're assuming that we're managing ourselves, but if you have people that you're trying to manage and those people are not using ticket system, then as a manager, you're severely handicapped. Because what if they call the developer directly?
Yeah.
What if they requested the block go from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, and then someone else at that organization calls up complaining, you know, who you worked with normally, and said, why was it moved? And you're like, I don't know why it was moved. You know, I'm going to look like an idiot in front of the lead contact of the client because their assistant called and talked to my developer and had it moved without my...
And even worse than that,
So everything's ticketed.
even worse than that, the client is going to feel like an idiot. If they
Yeah.
kick up a fuss, they're yelling at you and so forth because something's happened. You don't know why it's happened, and then it turns out a week later after you've sifted through it all, oh, it was so and so who asked for this to be done.
Yeah, the
Suddenly
client rarely admits their-
suddenly you're creating stress within your client's organization.
Yeah.
Document. It's the only clear path to making sure that you have the same understanding of any kind of issue, and it doesn't matter whether it's tiny or large. All
Ask
of
one
it has
quick
to be
question.
documented.
Are you guys
The
fixed
customer,
bid
though.
or fixed bid, or you charge by the hour?
We charge by the hour.
Okay.
But I'm really stingy about the client. I don't want them spending more money than they have to, and I'd hate to say, they say, hey, my password's gone. I don't remember my password again. We have the Mercedes-Benz Club. They're all like, I average age was 75. I don't remember my password. Could you change it real quick? Okay, done. Okay, well, I'm gonna triple that time because I'm gonna go into the Chili project. I'm gonna go ahead and say exactly what I did. I'm gonna say I changed the password at this time. It took 10 seconds. They call blah blah blah.
Okay, let me give you
They're spending much more money than they have to.
let me give you a perspective. One of your aged clients has gone completely nuts for some reason. That person calls in and says that they're so and so. They're not. You change the password. You have no, and that person goes in and starts doing all sorts
We
of.
get verification from the national board, so I don't just.
I mean-
customer calls in, hey, can you change my password? No,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. But we do have the board calling in. We know who they are.
I
we know
gotta
who we're
I gotta
talking to.
say that I think that you're engaged in a dangerous activity.
Oh yeah, and that's why we have so much discussion because everyone has different opinions
Yeah.
on this.
Remember,
You know,
he's
my-
bad cop.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm saying I don't want them to spend 3 times the money for something real quick, and a lot of you're right. I mean, they're gonna call and say, they have Alzheimer's. My password doesn't work. Well, I changed it. I never told you to change it. Yeah, you did. When?
Oh.
I mean, I guess I can bring up the Drupal log, but you're right in that
Yeah.
situation. But is it worth? We sometimes have clients, 10 times a day doing that, and even though it's little, say 10 minutes each,
Mhm.
or 1 minute each, so that's 10 minutes. But then it's 2 minutes to do the ticket, so that's 30 minutes for 10 minutes of work. That they're
So
paid
what
for.
about if you didn't charge by the hour and they had like an annual
Oh, then
fee?
We'd be out of
Would
business
you
if we
just
didn't
do
charge
it?
by the hour.
But you would just do it then? So the real issue
Well,
is that you're charging
exactly.
them?
If it was just like that, then you probably
Okay.
just bring, go and make a ticket.
But
But
they're calling you 10 times a day. They
Like I
deserve
said,
to pay for the full 30 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm
but-
sorry.
Sometimes it's just common sense too, right? I mean, sometimes you just have to do it, and it doesn't make sense to spend the time ticketing something that's,
yeah, it's personal. Everyone has different.
Sounds like
opinions.
your billing might just be set up differently. We charge by the hour for most projects too, but we bill in a 15-minute increment. So if something
Right.
takes me a
That's
minute
right.
to do it, it's still
That's
15.
exactly right.
Yeah, that's a good way to
So
do
like-
it.
Yeah.
All right, so we're very quickly running out of time. We're going to have a Bob section after lunch in the Lullabot room that we can continue this. Real quick, the other issue that we did not get to was user interface. we'll probably talk a little bit about that in the BOF, and we can discuss either of these other ones, or go into that. But, we'll just skip to the end here. So yeah, discussion will continue, room 106, we'll